everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and today I am finally going to get to doing my review of or my walkthrough I should say, of the Angel Tarot cards by Doreen Virtue with the artwork by Radley Valentine. Now, as I said in the Vlogmas where I opened this up, this was gifted to me along with an oracle deck to go with it, which is the Archangel Oracle cards, also by Doreen Virtue. And I was asked to give these a chance, and a fair chance, not just dismiss them because they were angel oracles. And that wasn't said out of any kind of rudeness. It was said in terms of, you know, obviously knowing my style and what decks that I normally do. I don't own any, or I do now. I didn't own any Doreen Virtue decks, not out of any opposition, but simply just wasn't something that I was naturally drawn to. Now, I'm going to try to be very nutshell-y because I have discussed religious things, and I don't want this to get, it's going to be long anyways because I need to go through all these cards, but I am going to nutshell where I'm coming from a religious standpoint, and let's be clear that I separate religion from spirituality. It doesn't mean that there isn't spirituality in religion, and it doesn't mean there isn't religion and spirituality, but that those two things can be very different. And for me, religion is the sort of human component to spirituality. We get our hands into things and want to define and label and organize things into something that makes sense to us, and so we create kind of religious structures that have really great bases that sometimes go a little out of control, and that's on all grounds. That is not any one particular religion. Obviously, given these cards, we are going to be, by nature, addressing the Christian faith or the Christian religion because, you know, this is from the Christian mythos. And when I, also let me be clear, that when I discuss mythology and religion in the same sentences in the same context, that is not done out of disrespect. I believe that mythology and religion are inherently tied together. You know, the mythologies of our histories are deeply seated and deeply tied with the religions of the past. So what we kind of look back on and see as mythologies were somebody's religion at a certain time. So they form the same function. They're just not ones that we maybe are actually expressing still today, but they form the same function. And I believe that the function that religion serves, so to speak, is answering those really difficult questions. I think that all humankind, from as long as there have been human beings, have asked these sorts of questions: is what is, you know, bigger than us? Is there something out there that's more than what we see? What is in the unseen realm? Where did I come from? Where am I going to? What happens after we die? Where does, you know, if we come from birth and we seem to have these inherited things, where did that come from? Like all these really important questions that, excuse me, that human beings are asking. The answer to those questions, or the attempt to answer those questions, is where religions spring from. Those answers are going to change depending on the culture that it springs from, depending on the time that it springs from, depending on all kinds of factors. The answer is going to be very different depending on those cultural and almost anthropological things. And so my point being that I have a high regard for what religion is trying to do. The problem that I have personally with religion of any kind is that when you get enough human beings together, unfortunately, it can shift from the core answer to those questions into more of a militant, my way that is the highway, and, you know, if you're not on par with what I'm saying, then you're wrong, I'm right, and it starts to just snowball into problems. And so, you know, many of the world's historical problems, you know, have stemmed because of religious type issues. So I do have problems with what humans do with religion very often. But I have a deep respect for the questions and the longings that religions are trying to answer. Now, from a my personal history, as I've said before, and I'm just going to quickly nutshell it so we just know, if you stumble on this video, you know where I'm coming from with this walkthrough. So I came from a very comfortable Catholic upbringing from birth until I was about 5th grade. I have very beautiful memories of being a comfortable Catholic. We would go to a little tiny church in my grandma's little tiny fishing town where I spent a lot of my time growing up. I have fond memories of, because I wasn't raised strict Catholic, I have very fond memories of the rituals of Catholicism. So the kneeling and the sitting and the kneeling and the sitting and the candle lighting and the statues and sitting and talking to Mary and that kind of ideology and the rituals there's a beauty in rituals. We all have rituals, even as tarot readers, that when we go to do a tarot reading, we have these certain things that we do because people enjoy rituals. They help you sink into a moment quicker. When you build up these rituals that happen, you very quickly can sink into the moment. So when you walk into a beautiful Catholic church and you kneel and you cross yourself and you kneel to do this and stand to do this, it's a shortcut into that space. Just like tarot cards are shortcuts into tapping into either our internal selves, your spirit, whatever you see tarot as, they are shortcuts to get you there faster. It's stuff that's already there. It's communication that can already be done, but the tarot images and oracle images help us shortcut into that in a quicker space. The same thing that other rituals will do when you go to light the candles and you set out certain stones and you set out a certain cloth. It all sinks you into the moment quicker. And so rituals are quite beautiful, and I have very fond memories of that. The rosary beads and all that kind of thing. It just makes me think of my grandmother, who is a sweet, beautiful, wonderful-hearted woman who is my idea of what it means to be a good Catholic woman. And so I have very great memories of this. Then in 5th grade, my parents were saved into the fundamental Baptist. So I'm not lumping all Baptists into that category because there are many different forms of Baptists. But the way that I was raised in this particular type of Baptist, it was very strict. No movies, no music, no holidays, no pants. We didn't have a television before then, but we certainly wouldn't have had a television if we had. And so when you're in that age, when you're already kind of grown up comfortably and you go in 5th grade and all of a sudden, no Christmas this year, no Easter this year. I'd never worn a skirt, I don't think, or a dress. I was a real tomboy. All of a sudden, no pants. It was quite a shocking shift. And it was very much of the hellfire damnation. You are going to get saved or you're going to burn and maggots are going to eat your skin and things are going to be gnawing at your bones and screamings from hell. And, that kind of full-on kind of thing. So that was a very harsh shift for me, religion-wise, and so that was quite, for somebody, well, it's hard for, I think, anybody, but I certainly have very active imagination, and it was very, very devastating type of religion for my mindset, and has caused quite a lot of problems. So that was about 5th grade to about my senior year in high school. I started to really think, this just isn't for me. Got through high school, had some experiences in Africa that broadened my mind. And then when my son was born very sick, I just walked away from all of it. I didn't know how to untangle my upbringing in the fundamental Baptist mindset, I didn't know how to untangle it from my understanding of God or the divine without just walking away from all of it. So I ditched the whole thing. Don't want anything. If there's a God out there, I don't want anything to do with you. You stay over here. I'll stay over here. Let's just agree to disagree and not have communication. So I did that for a number of years, and then I started the process of rebuilding what I did believe. And much of that is based on things like the hero's journey and mythology. Mythology actually helped to start to repair that. Some of Joseph Campbell's books and that understanding of what we can really pull out of these mythologies, even the Christian religion and these all the different things, the understanding that they are trying to express the sacred and to various degrees of success, trying to express that. I was able to start to see that, and then studied all kinds of things. I studied Wicca, not as practicing, but just studying it as I hadn't been exposed to a lot of things, so studied a lot of different things. I do have a video, which I will link to, which lists sort of the 5 or 6 books that really kind of informed that journey from having given up on all of it to getting to a point where I was comfortable in my own spirituality. So I'll put a link to that in the description box below. But I studied very heavily with Zen Buddhism, and it was actually through Zen Buddhism and Thich Nhat Hanh, something I had listened to, that a talk that he had given. And he talked about how, being a Buddhist doesn't mean you can't be something else. There are Christian Buddhists. I know Christian Buddhists. And that, for me, Buddhism is a philosophy. It is a way of living. It is a way of thinking. It's not, I don't think of Buddhism at all as a religion. There are the people who do, and that's its own thing. But for me, it's a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It's a philosophy. And so it can incorporate with any religion. But one of the things he said was that our history, our spiritual history, our religious history is important. That it does inform us. It informs us in ways that we don't ever fully walk away from. It's still part and parcel to our being. And so coming to terms with that is important. It's an important step to kind of go back and sort of readdress and figure out, make peace with your history, your religious history. And that was really powerful to me. And so I did. I went back, kind of did some re-looking at the Bible again. Now I will say, and one of the positives of the way that I was raised is that I know many Christians who are, professing Christians and walking the walk of Christians who have never read the Bible cover to cover. Which I find kind of difficult to fathom. If you have a sacred text, I think it should be something you really know and understand. Whereas the way I was raised, you read the Bible, and I read the Bible cover to cover over 9 times, not to mention all the other in-between times. So I have a very strong background in understanding what's in the Bible, what's not in the Bible. As well as, and we're getting into the angel things, I really was, some of my love of what I do now came out of the Bible, because the Bible is a beautiful text. But, for me personally, when you try to completely take it out of its history of its people, you start to, you lose things. There's context there that needs to be given. But in all, it's got some beautiful things in it, and there is a lot there about gems and stones. There's a lot there about numerology. Angels, I was always very interested in. I had done a lot of studies on angels, of the hierarchies. I had books, not in the Catholic sense, but just in a more, I don't want to say realistic, but my understandings of angels were much more, not some military, because there was obviously military factions and things like that. I don't think, I guess, of angels so much in this terms as I do in just, powerful beings that some have wings and some don't have wings, and, that kind of thing. So I really did study, I have a very actually strong historical studying, or history myself, personal history in studying all the different angels and hierarchies and all that kind of thing. It's been a very, very long time, but I did. So I have a history in all of it that I came, so I kind of went out of whack, but so I went back and checked it all out. I thought, okay, is there some of this that I can reincorporate? And I ended up finding out that it's not a path that I would ever go back on, but that I came to peace with it, and was able to find some things that were going on today that we're still having conversations, like Rob Bell. It was one of the books that I read. I have a great deal of respect for him. I agree with most of everything that he had to say, and was just able to come to terms with seeing the beauty in Christianity that I had kind of missed out, and in some ways kind of stepped, when Thich Nhat Hanh kind of called to come to peace with and find the sacredness of your history, your religious history. I kind of stepped back even beyond the Baptist and more back into that understanding of the sacredness of ritual in the Catholic Church as I was raised. Again, many people have a much different experience than I did, but we're just going off of, many people have much different experience with the Baptist Church than I did as well. So we really are creatures of our own experiences, and so I was able to come to peace with that. And I do believe that there is a God. Divine, I would say, for me, that I do believe in the divine and various and sundry ways in which that may be expressed. I do have a sense of the divine and the sense of the sacred. I just kind of have my own path there, I guess, or I feel like there's many paths there, many expressions of the divine, and they all have something wonderful to tell when we tap into that sense. So I don't know how short of a nutshell. No, that was not super short, but that's my nutshell. Now, the other thing that I want to briefly touch on, because when I did talk about that I was going to be doing a review, there was definitely a mixed reaction, both in messages and this kind of thing. And so there was definitely a mixed reaction, because you have people, obviously, they're really into angel cards and things like that, and other people not so much. There's a strong, obviously pagan community. And then also a lot that came up just about Doreen Virtue herself. I know nothing about Doreen Virtue. I mean, I know what she looks like. I'm aware, that she's, makes lots of angel decks and things like that. But I don't really, it's not somebody that I followed or paid close attention to. So about her personally, and there's a lot of attacks, justified or not, I'm not aware. But there were, there's a lot of people that, oh, she's like the most wonderful thing on the earth. And then other people, oh, she's, the Antichrist comparison. So there's definitely seems to be a split divide on her, and I don't know anything about her. But the truth of the matter is, I don't really care. I mean, yes, we obviously want to have a resonance with the people that create the decks that we use, but in the end, for me, a tarot deck or an oracle deck is a tool, and it gets imbued with my own and what I put into it and how I use it. So if I can resonate with the images, if it slips me, shortcuts me into the space that I need to get into in order to help people and to give messages, that's all that practically matters for me. And I know that will be slightly controversial, because obviously if there was somebody that I, was really known to be, this horrible person, but then there's still, I don't know, that's a very gray and wavering line. But in a nutshell, I haven't researched every person that's made every single deck that I have. So there could be somebody in here that we think is absolutely wonderful who really isn't, who's out to make a good buck and finds this is a great industry for their art. Or there are decks that people create out of artists that had no take on the tarot whatsoever, and their artwork is just being used for that. So it's a gray area. But for me personally, if I can work with a deck's imagery and the keywords that it's meaning, I don't worry too much about the rest, because it's a tool for me. The deck itself doesn't come with any inherent energy. If it does, it's washed away when I smudge it and put it under the full moon and kind of claim it, mark it, set it up into my space, and it becomes part of an extension of me that is my shortcut to slip into readings. So, everybody deals or handles these things differently and sees these things differently. So this video is not a, my rambling point is, this video is not intended to be a look into Doreen Virtue and her practices and how she churns out decks or doesn't churn out decks or anything like that. I'm simply going to be looking at these decks as decks to see whether I can use them or I can't use them, because I have had requests for, and that's the last point I want to make, and I'm aware that this is going to be a longer video. I'm sure I will probably separate this introduction off from the other, but the other point I want to make is that there is a difference for me personally between what decks that I might use that if it was just me reading for myself. There would be quite a few decks that I have that I probably wouldn't have if it was just me, other than unless I was just collecting, but in terms of using. But the fact of the matter is that as a professional reader, I want to be able to have decks that talk to all different kinds of people and that people respond to in all different ways. As long as it's something that I can tap into, as long as I can get into the energy of the deck and tap into those messages to be able to use it, I don't have any problem with that. And I have an understanding that how I am and how I view getting a reading is not the same as everybody else. I am a very practical, very analytical. I'm also a big dreamer, but in terms of like getting in and working and doing the nitty-gritty, I really don't like a lot of sugarcoating. I want you to just give it to me plainly. What's going on? What do I have to deal with? And then I'll sort it out and deal with it, and then maybe pull an oracle card to give me some hugs at the end of the hard work. That's kind of, I mean, it sounds, I know that probably will offend some people, but in a way that's kind of how I am. Like I really do, but I'm not harsh, but for myself, I'm saying when I do reading, I like tarot. I like the system of tarot. I like the system of I Ching or I Ching, because they're complete systems with light and shadow involved. And I think that that's really, really important. I'm a swords person. My favorite suit is the sword suit, because I want to see the nitty-gritty of life as well as the high moments, because it's the whole mix of that that makes a life. And so for me, that's really important. However, there are people and there are situations and there are times in which we don't necessarily need to be confronted by the nitty-gritty every single, sorry, my phone is over there making noise. But there's some times that we aren't in the position that we need to be confronted by those things. It doesn't mean that we're watering something down or that we are, we, in a sense, maybe we are, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily wrong. There is a time that you wrap your arms around and hug somebody and just hold space and give them a place to breathe and to heal a little bit before we start to do the hard work. There's a time and there's a space for that. And I have certainly had people say, I really want to get a reading on such and such. I feel very vulnerable. I feel very fragile. I've had them flat out tell me, I need some mothering through the cards, or I need some healing through the cards, or then others, I need some hard work, doing some hard work. And there are just people who at that particular time don't need to see somebody laying on the ground with 10 swords in their back. And I love the 10 of swords. They don't necessarily want to see a horned and hoofed devil, because no matter in that moment, if they're in that fragile space, no matter what I'm saying about what these cards are meaning, they don't they're fixated on images that for them, for whatever reason, don't resonate. And so we have beautiful decks like the Chrysalis Tarot. We have beautiful decks like the Victorian Fairy Tarot. We have beautiful decks like there's another one that was in my head. Or even the Psychic Tarot for the Heart. But I do have decks like that are nurturing. And I don't think that's not ones I'm going to use continually and all the time. But there are certain times in which we just need to hold space, and we just need to hug, and we need to meet somebody where they are instead of insisting right in that moment that they be where we think they should be. We might want to, as readers, work to get them there, but maybe in that very moment they just need a little bit of softer guidance. Now, that being said, If it's a tarot deck, I don't mind that names are changed. I don't mind that they've maybe have taken the swords out of the back of somebody for the Ten of Swords, but I do want the initial, the core meanings to still be accessible so that I can still access the meaning without maybe some of the graphicness. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think somebody who wants decks that are like the Angel Tarot deck or the Chrysalis Tarot, and I'm missing a big one that I know that I use for this, and it's just, I'm completely blanking on it. But those, you know what I'm talking about, these the decks that are what we would call, oh, the Green Witch. The Green Witch Tarot is a pagan version, in my opinion, of something like this. It's very soft, it's very sweet, the world is beautiful, that is, the whole entire world that that deck inhabits is beautiful and sunshiny and nurturing and abundant. And so in much the same way, I believe that is very nurturing, non-confrontational deck for people who are comfortable in the more pagan nature path, that functions very much the same as this does, in my opinion. I guess I haven't gone through this, but that idea of a softer deck, yeah, so that was a good one. That was the one I was trying to think of. I almost didn't buy the Green Witch Tarot because I thought it looked too soft. For me, it was just a little bit too sweet for me. But it ends up, you know, it has a very good energy, and it has something to say, again, to people who are in that space, and even to myself sometimes when I'm in that space. So my point is that nobody should be telling somebody else that you shouldn't have this particular deck. That's not a real tarot deck. That's not, you know, maybe it's not a traditional tarot deck. But just with religion, I think that religion's problem is that they go to a certain point and the conversation stops, and then everything just stagnates right there and there's no growth. The conversation around tarot and around decks and around oracle cards doesn't ever stop. It's a growing, morphing thing. And so now we have decks that are, I mean, Angel Tarot decks, and are, as long as, again, those key meanings are there to be found, for me, I'm okay with that. And I would never look to somebody else and say, oh, you only use Doreen Virtue decks? Like, ooh, like, really? And same thing, I wouldn't say to somebody who just uses a Marseille deck or something like that and say, or the Thoth deck, and say, oh, you know, really, you don't use Rider-Waite-Smith? Like, you're not really getting the full effect of blah, 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 you know, whatever. Everybody's group can look at another group and have something negative to say, and that doesn't serve anybody. You know, the point of cards of any kind are to hold space for ourselves and for others, to nurture ourselves and our others, to call things out and be blunt about circumstances sometimes, and all the various ways we use it, and how a person chooses their tools is nobody else's business, in my opinion, and nothing to be looked down about. Because I do think that in the tarot community, and I myself can be guilty of this, that there is that sort of condescension that can come towards like angel cards or something like that, when there's no call for that, because for somebody that may be exactly what they need in that moment, or even to call them beginners decks, I think that's condescending. Somebody might use angel decks their entire life, and that's how they tap into and access what they see as the divine, and that does not make them less than or more than. It just means that's what is their shorthand to slide them into the space that they need to do to get the messages across for themselves or for the people they read for. If that is the Rider-Waite-Smith for another person, that's what the Rider-Waite-Smith is. If it's for somebody like me who reads for a variety of people, where I might actually have clients that say, you know, I would really love it. Do you have any of Doreen Virtue's decks? Do you have any angel decks? As long as I can tap into the energy and respect that energy, and it still brings up the messages that I have to say, there's, you know, it's not for me to say for somebody else. That, you know, it doesn't compromise myself, as long as I can, or say that I'm less of a tarot reader because I can maybe tap. And I don't know. You know, I haven't looked at this. We're getting ready to do that, but I think you understand where I'm coming, and I think I've rambled at it long enough. But I thought it was just all stuff that I wanted to kind of tap into and address, and so I hope that you all take this with a, you know, with this intention, which is just to try to, you know, talk through these conversations. because they're important. They're a part and part of our community as a whole. And I think instead of kind of dividing out into chunks, like we can kind of a little pull into space a little bit, even though something may not particularly be a tool we would use. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to make this part 1, and so then I will add a second part where we start to look at these cards, which again is the Angel Tarot cards by Doreen Virtue and Radley Valentine.